Bill Schiebler with us, and he's a Vietnam veteran. He was in the battle in the Central Highlands, the first major battle in Vietnam, and there's a movie out called We Were Soldiers. He knows Colonel Moore. We're going to get right to it. And this show, we're going to try to go into Vietnam a little. It's a touchy subject, but I think we need to hear about it. So we'll be right back.
A small annoyance left unattended can lead to bigger problems, like the little cheat you may find on your Medicare statement, billing for services not provided, unnecessary goods and services, double billing. Medicare fraud and abuse waste billions. Who pays? You pay. If you see something questionable, fight back. Call the Medicare Fraud Hotline at 1-800-447-TIPS. A message from AARP and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Welcome back. We have Bill Schiebler with us, Vietnam veteran, and was in the battle in the Central Highlands, the first major battle in Vietnam. And you know, I'm just going to right off the front let you folks know that Bill has got multiple sclerosis, and he might have a little problem once in a while with a wordage, or I might have a problem. This is a touchy subject for me, but just so that you know we're okay. And I'm just so excited you're here, Bill.
Thank you, Randy. I'm
coming.
honored to be here.
I tell you, I just got to tell you right off the front, I'm so honored to be with you. I was in the tail end of the Vietnam War, and I have some things that hurt me, but I'm so in awe of you infantry people and things that did this and did what your country said. And I want other people to think about this. I want them, their kids, that we ought to think about our veterans, all of them. But we're zeroing on Vietnam today, which I'm glad, because it's been a sore one for me. And I got this program now, and I'm glad to be able to do it. So thanks for coming.
Okay, I'm very honored.
Okay. Well, you know, usually we get to know you a little bit, but I'm so excited I want to get right into this. We're going to kind of, you actually know Colonel Moore, and you were in this battle that this movie, We Were Soldiers, were in. Is this right?
That's right.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to go right there. I'm going to right there, and we're going to talk a little bit about you too and everything, but we're going to go right to the source. And I know we got some questions here, so I'm just going to kind of scan a little bit. I can get going, so I want to be focused. But, you know, let's go back now. How in the world did you become an infantry rifle platoon leader in the Army?
As a kid, I had some bone defects, and I wasn't able to use myself to play contact sports. I wound up playing out alone in the fields a lot and wishing that I could play baseball or football with my buddies in town. I think that something drives somebody to want to go into certain parts of the service. For me, I think it was a fact that I wanted to be able to do some physical work that I hadn't had the chance to do before. When I was raised in a small town, I remember a very decorated combat veteran from Korea talking to me, and he said, Bill, you're going to go into the Army, huh? He said, well, let me tell you a couple of pieces of advice. First of all, volunteer for everything you possibly can get. And I thought, but he was right, because the more training I got, the more fortunate my chances were to survive this thing. And when I went into the Army, I had absolutely no idea that I was going to go into combat.
Well, in this, you were, how old were you?
I was 24 years old.
So, just do a little comparison later, but did you view it as kind of glamorous? I'm going to go in there and be a G.I. Joe guy, or how do young kids look at that?
Well, I think a lot of young children are a little bit frisky. They want to join the Marines, or they want to become an airborne ranger, or this or that. And I wish somebody could have taken me aside to say, Bill, if you try to do these things, you may well put your own life in jeopardy. The second question that my friend asked me was, the second piece of advice he gave me was to be kind and loving to my mother. I thought, what? And he was right, because I think that the most hideous sound I've ever heard in my life was that we got overrun, and we had some people dying out in front of our lines only about 30 yards. They knew they were dying. they were crying out to their mothers.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting.
So that was, you know,
And I, even sometimes when you didn't have that, the greatest relationship, it seems like that element is still there, the parents, isn't it? Kind of like honoring your mother and father. It's kind of like we can stem these things back, I think, to God, you know. Well, the second part of your question, why did this decision profoundly affect your life, and why did a family friend back in your hometown have such a lasting effect upon you?
well, I think that he was telling me subtly to get as much training as I possibly could. And he was saying subtly to me, although I didn't realize it at the time, was that the more training I had, the best assurance I had for staying alive if it was a combat situation. And I went into the paratroopers. I had all of my jumps stateside. I don't have any combat jumps. I had absolutely no idea. I was a young kid. I had no idea I was going to go into combat. I went into the Rangers, and if I could talk about the Rangers for a second, Randy, this is going to set the tone for us. The movie only will say 125,000 to 175,000 men and women were in Vietnam at that time. But Vietnam rapidly got well over 500,000 people over there. But the Rangers are a very elite group of commando forces. At the time I was there, we had less than 400 of us in Vietnam. And I think that somebody has to be very driven to become a Ranger. We started off with 1,100 men who had requested the training. We lost a couple of All-American football players, so it was well beyond the physical exertion and stamina. Only 106 of us ended out of the 1,100. And we lost a lot of Green Beret people in the training, and I had utmost respect for the Green Berets. I think they are terrific soldiers, but I was very puzzled about that, and that has been a question that I have looked back upon the years to wonder, why does someone make it through to become a Ranger?
You know, we could talk for 4 hours, Bill. I mean, we probably will when we're done. I'm trusting the Lord to help me get going here, but I want to get to the movie, and we'll kind of go through the movie, and you can tell me how it really was. And from what I understand, it was pretty close. But let's get right to the movie, and we'll just see what happens. You know, I'm a little bit interested in this first scene where the French army. I forgot. I took notes, but what year that was? Was that the exact same place where those people got massacred, where he came down?
Way back in the early 1950s, in fact, right after World War II, Ho Chi Minh had gone to the Sorbonne University in Paris. He asked the Americans if they would be allies at that time. Well, we were allies of France, and he was a communist, and I don't think the younger generation can comprehend what we went through with the communists are coming and being so concerned about that. By the time it got to the French being driven out of Vietnam, the French built a very interesting fortification that was about, I think, a little bit northwest or west of Hanoi, North Vietnam, called Dien Bien Phu. And they boasted that the North Vietnamese could never overrun them because they were down in a valley surrounded by mountains. Well, what happened was that the North Vietnamese disassembled all of their artillery pieces, brought them up to the tops of the mountains, and rained fire down on the French so badly that over 23,000 French people were captured and remained prisoner for many years. And a lot of people don't know this fact, but that the North Vietnamese government would sell individual French prisoners back to the French government. They were known as pearls. The price might be $2 or $3 or $4 million, but that's what happened. So the beginning of the movie sets the tone that the French had been in Vietnam, and where this action occurred was right between where the 1st Air Cavalry's base camp was and a town west of there called Pleiku. There was a terrible pass called Mang Yang Pass. And the French were completely obliterated at Mang Yang Pass. The movie showed probably a tenth of the French column called Mobile Force 100 that was wiped out. And I think every single one of them were killed, too.
So they underestimated the strength of the North Vietnamese, you think?
No, not really. But there were so many more North Vietnamese who were into that battle than French. The French didn't have a chance.
Well, you know, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I still have trouble in my mind. We wanted to stop the aggression, the communist movement and things. Why didn't it work? What were we trying to do, and why didn't it work? Why couldn't we stop this aggression, and what mistake did we make?
Can I answer your question in a roundabout way to share a wonderful personal experience that I had? I wrote an article while I was in Vietnam about why I thought we were there that was later reprinted in newspapers over the country. And I had the chance to visit President and Mrs. Eisenhower at their winter home in Palm Springs, California. And I was cautioned by their medical team before I went in there not to say anything about combat or about Vietnam. And I'll never forget, he said, "Well, I'm sure they asked you not to talk about Vietnam out there." And I said, "Yes, sir." I didn't know how to address him. I said, "I don't know if I should call you Mr. President or sir." He said, "Well, we're both in military uniforms." I said, "Well, thank you, sir." But at the end, he said, "We're going to lose this war, because this is the first war that I can think of in military history that does not involve lines. In all of the other wars, the good guys were on one side and the bad guys were on the other, and the line would move closer to Berlin or through the Pacific closer to Tokyo. But in Vietnam, and I'll never forget him saying this to me, we're not fighting with lines. We're fighting trying to overcome hearts. And you just can't do that. It's not going to work out for us. I hope that helps you a little bit.
I wanted to throw that out because I think a lot of people still think about that, you know, and it was such a mesmery of, I'm not going to say mistake, but it was hard at the time. We thought, well, we can do this, but obviously it was tough the way we went about it.
A lot of our generals were World War II generals. They were used to fighting on lines, but all of a sudden we had this fantastic new concept of warfare, namely the helicopter. We called them choppers. And the choppers could get you behind lines and among lines. They were very mobile. But once we got the men there and we went through these horrendous battles, what did we do then? We got up in our chopper, as the movie ends and shows you, and we went away. And it got to a point with our unit that I would say to my men, "Boy, something tells me we've been here before." He'd say, "Yeah, this is the 4th time we've been here."
Yeah, just kept
It
going.
became a ridiculous, just a very simple battle of body counts, which was so sad. And there is a young war correspondent who has been wonderful to me over the years, named Joe Galloway. And Joe wrote the book that General Moore had written, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And Joe mentioned on a documentary I watched one night that you could almost trace the rot of when Vietnam began by the battle in the Ya Drang. Now the movie says Ia Drang, but in Vietnamese the word Ia is called Ya. It means river. It meant the River Drang.
And that was in 1965.
1965, right.
Okay. You know what? I didn't do what I said, but we're going to start. I got some questions here, starting with the movie right after we take a break. All right? It's so interesting. Maybe we can have a 2-hour show today. I don't think so. Folks, we'll be right back. You don't want to miss the rest of this one.
Hi, I'm Chad Henning, defensive tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. Getting the opportunity for a first-class education was what kept me on the winning path. It took a lot of determination and stick-to-itness. But after graduating from the Air Force Academy, I became an A-10 pilot and then went on to win 3 Super Bowl rings. It all starts with a good education. Take advantage of your opportunities. Stay in school, graduate, and whatever you do in life, aim high.
back. My name is Randy Barr, and we have Bill Schiebler with us. Vietnam veteran, was at the battle that We Were Soldiers is about, the movie. Well, you know, got to get the movie now. Colonel Moore, I'm going to kind of go from the movie, and I'm interested in how close it was, and you know him and everything. It was interesting to me that he graduated from Harvard, it said, with an international relations master's or something. For the kind of hardcore officer that he seemed to be, can you see this fit? Or?
Oh, I thought that was very accurate. Yeah. He's a West Point graduate too, and he commanded an infantry rifle company in Korea. He was a decorated veteran from Korea, and he was what we call a master parachutist. So he had been in the airborne units for quite a bit of time. I thought the movie was very accurate when it came to that.
Did you feel Mel Gibson did a pretty fair job of the personality?
Oh, Mel had him right down to a T.
Really?
Ah, right there. Yep.
I saw a documentary where he was with Colonel Moore, and he was on the set, and he was really intense he wanted to look into Colonel Moore's eye. He said he wanted to try to do it right. That touched me a little bit. That this actor apparently seemed to care about what he was doing.
I think they have become very close personal friends. I think they just clicked. It was more than just the usual movie actor portraying a person. I think they have become very close personal friends, and I think that this movie really touched Mel Gibson personally. Mel is an Aussie. He was a Catholic. Hal Moore was a Catholic.
Oh.
I thought that Madeline Stowe portrayed Julie Moore right to the T. I can't tell you how much I admire Julie Moore for her courage.
So how well did you know them? I know them because if they saw me, you'd recognize me, or did you get to know this family, the Moores, better than that?
I knew them fairly well. In fact, yet to this day, I still trade letters back and forth. He will write me once in a while. But Julie has been just wonderful to me. In this day and age of email, trading back and forth, it's kind of fun to get a beautiful handwritten letter, or snail mail, we call it. And I have one right on my desk over there that she sent me about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But we keep in touch with each other regularly.
Great. Well, you know, one thing that caught me is I think of a leader that's going to take you in the battle, and you got all of what it takes, and you got courage and all this. I kind of think of that sometimes as hard, yet it portrayed that this man got on his hands and knees, prayed with his kids. At one point in the movie, you can tell me whether I'm wondering how much they added, but he got with one of his lieutenants that was wondering about this, and they prayed together to God. This is a different look at someone that has that kind of authority, and you know what I'm saying? You got the ramble thing and all that. This was a different twist. Did you see a lot of spirituality in Mr. Moore?
Tremendous amount of spirituality. Last week I heard a critic talk about the movie, talk about how he sounded like John Wayne, and it just infuriated me because Colonel Moore was a very, very sensitive person. And the young lieutenant who he sat with in the chapel was a wonderful guy I went into the Army the same day with. His name was Jack Geekin. And that was precise, right to the, I thought that was very accurate. And I think that Colonel Moore instilled a lot of confidence in his people. Instead of going and chewing out somebody, he would instead accentuate the positive part and go ahead and give a certain compliment to a man who he needed. And it worked out just so well. He was a delightful person to be under the command of.
So even the helicopter person that in charge of the helicopters, was this somewhat true that he wanted the snake, whatever, and that kind of a too tall shouldn't have been in the Army, and you kind of got the like the Baa black sheep thing. Is this somewhat accurate where he went after the helicopter group that he wanted?
You can't see this on the camera, folks, but I'm 6'4", We had a guy who was a chopper pilot who would go anywhere. I think I came up to about his shoulders. Ed Jones, we used to call him Too Tall. The actual movie actor was a lot leaner, a lot heavier set than Ed was, but Ed was just a terrific chopper pilot. And the Yadrang awarded 2 Medal of Honors, which are our nation's highest awards, and Ed Jones just got his last year. He got a Medal of Honor for what he did, Yadrang. And Bruce Crandall is retired. He lives in Mesa, Arizona. Snake, you got it. He had over 700 combat missions in Vietnam and 3 combat tours. The last tour, unfortunately, he broke his back, but he still returned to be able to fly.
So this movie was pretty accurate.
I thought this movie was very accurate. The only thing that I could pick out, Randy, with the movie that wasn't probably what we saw was that by the time these North Vietnamese people had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, I call it the Ho Chi Minh Interstate because it was a great, they had trucks going down there and everything else. But we saw dried up blood along the ears, below the ears from many of these soldiers. They had been bombed so badly on the Ho Chi Minh Trail that a lot of these North Vietnamese soldiers did not have helmets anymore. A lot of them were just stone deaf. Their hearing had just been knocked out. I think the movie did a good job of portraying later on in the movie that they used a lot of camouflage branches and so on the helmet. But other than that, I thought the movie was very accurate.
I thought it was interesting the way Colonel Moore knew how to do his job, and he wasn't afraid to do it, but he trusted God. It was pretty obvious, and that he was able to give God and pray with that lieutenant and his children and things, yet then not just say, oh, God, you do it. Then he would go out and do what he had to do, but he knew where to give his prayers to religion. I found that really, I would want to be under someone like that also, you know.
You know, whether you talk about God or whether you don't in combat, it's very quickly put aside. Colonel Moore was an upfront guy. He called a spade, and he made no bones about it, telling us that he was very spiritual. And I think that all of us who were with him began to realize that there was a higher power here than just a bunch of men fighting each other and trying to kill each other. And I think that he did more to help me personally to come to grips with spirituality than probably anybody who I had met up until that time. I think at one point we had a very seasoned sergeant who didn't believe in God, who had gone through 3 wars. He had gone through World War II, Korea, now he was in Vietnam. But it got so bad that this sergeant started to cry out, please, God, please save us. We went, my gosh, that was the last person in the world. But, you know, he was a paratrooper, and there were certain things you didn't say to somebody. We never kidded about him afterwards. We saw him going to a chapel afterwards, and he found the good Lord right on a battlefield. And they joke about the saying that you don't find any atheists on battlefields. I beg to differ with that, because just seeing him come to the Lord, and he was a very respected man, I think that had a profound effect on us, the rest of us.
You know, someone once told me the Lord will take you the easiest way you'll go, and sometimes that it can be easy if you believe, or it can be like you say. And I can imagine in that kind of an atmosphere. Well, you know, that leads us into what this show is really all about. Faith, and is God real? Is Jesus Christ the Son of God? Is the God of the Bible right? It looked to me like Mr. Moore was brought up Catholic, and that's okay. Bible is right there. The Gospels are clear. It looked to me like the man believed that because of what he did. And like you said, he let people know. And that was encouraging to me that was in the war like that. But I thought for you personally, you maybe could share. We like to ask the people that come on the show, how do you know the Lord in your heart, not just your head. In other words are words, but how do you know that Jesus is real, and how is he personal to you?
Before you and I started to tape today, I was mentioning of the privilege that a lot of young children have, where they were able to find the Lord when they were in 6th grade at a Bible camp. I wasn't as fortunate as that. I had, I guess you're saying, I had to go the bad way, the hard way. And I think that I had been raised as a Catholic, and I think that I had fallen away. I wasn't going to Mass or church on Sundays. I kind of lackadaisical until we got into jumping. And it's a long ways down to fall 1,250 feet if that parachute doesn't open. And I remember going over to the chapel on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It was just jam-packed. If you didn't get there 15 or 20 minutes beforehand, you had to stand outside.
Huh.
Just by chance, I went over on a Saturday morning, the morning thereafter, when we didn't have a jump. The chapel was totally empty. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 other people there. That had an effect on my spirituality. I started to say, God, are you only there for give me this, give me that, make the chute open, do this for me, do that for me? Or are you above all of this? Is there something more to you? And that started me on a journey to learn to praise my Lord, to tell my Lord that I loved him. And it started to develop from there. So this is an all gradual thing. People will say, well, Bill, when did you find the Lord?
Yeah.
It was a gradual process.
You know, I'm doing this show, we're going to take a break just a second, and we'll come back and we're going to get right into the war again, because we brought the people, I think, to a place where they might be touched. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I confess, because of my situation, I was suicidal and all this, and I cried out to the Lord, and praise God, you know, I believed he saved me. But everybody has their own. I've come to see God so loved the world, he gave his only son. Those who believe will have everlasting life, will not perish. That's a point, believe, in the heart between you and God. You do not have to have a date, not according to the scripture. You believe. And when people talk one way and they don't act it, I'm scared for them, because if you really believe something, why would you do the opposite? But you bring up a good point. You knew he was real, and then you start praising God, and you start getting in the Word. You believe. You don't need to have a time and a date. I'm not against a time and a date either, by the way. I mean, and I would tell anybody, tell the Lord you love him and that you're a sinner. Ask him in your life. But you bring up an excellent point, and I'm sure a lot of other viewers can identify with it. So we're going to take a break here, and we'll come back and see if we can get to the nitty-gritty of this movie. All right, we'll be right back.
You know, I used to be pro-choice, and then something happened to me. I had a baby of my own. When I was pregnant, I finally realized that all this little kid was trying to do was make it. Just make it. Just like all of us. So I haven't figured it all out yet, but why, when I wanted the baby, it was a baby. And when I didn't, it was something else. Think about it.
Welcome back. We have Bill Schiebler with us, a Vietnam veteran. And, you know, at break you were talking, we could go for 4 hours and still having trouble thinking how we're going to get this in there. We're going to go back to the movie in Vietnam, but we're talking about you were a paratrooper, and a unique accident or something happened. Can you tell us about that?
I didn't have any combat jumps. My jumps were stateside. But one day I jumped out of an airplane and my chute started to collapse upon me. And in horror, I tried to pop my reserve chute, and that just drooped below me. And I suddenly realized I was standing on top of another fellow's parachute. Oh. I was just terrified. I crawled over to the edge and came down the lines. And I hugged him, and I said, when we land, you're going to go that way. I'm going to go that way. Oh, I was so scared. Oh, yeah. Because these are accidents that happen when you're jumping. And
am I hearing this wrong, though? But your chute didn't really work. And if I put God's sovereignty into this, you happen to have to be right there on top of another guy's chute, or?
Oh, thank you, good Lord.
Otherwise, you'd have went
Oh,
Roman candle type, right?
I'm not one in luck. I think that a coincidence was occurring there. That was a small miracle.
You just happened to be on top of this guy's.
Just on top of it. Well,
Oh,
that's
my
why I
goodness.
wasn't getting air out of my parachute, but, oh, my
Did the
gosh.
guy know you were there? Or did he get surprised when you come down? Or
I don't think he even knew I was there. I think he was looking down toward the ground.
Oh,
He was
man.
probably, well, the risers are the cords on a parachute. They're pretty long. They're 25 or 30 feet. He was down below me, 25 or 30 feet.
All right, going back to the movie. You know, I don't want to go where I'm coming from. But I've had friends die in Vietnam, as you have, I'm sure. I ended up not going because I was tail end. I was in the Air Force, and I have real emotions about this. But I heard some people in the theater complaining about the violence and things of this nature. I guess I look at it two different ways. If they sensationalize that to make the movie, I'm not for it. But if these kinds of things really were the way it was, maybe we ought to look at it. Maybe we ought to think of it when we see them. I don't know. In your estimation, was it sensationalized, the killing and the gruesome part of it?
I knew one of your questions could possibly set me off. With the MS, I cry uncontrollably sometimes or laugh, but you just about brought me to tears because the real thing was 10 times worse than the movie portrayed. I don't think that there is any way that a person could get into something like that without getting real descriptive.
You know, now, I don't mean to go off here, but I don't understand how our society, the kids got games where they're blowing things up and blood's flying all over. And I don't even want to get into the spiritual implications of desensitizing or anything. But then when it comes to what really happened, these men died for you so this country could be free. They want to bellyache about it. It doesn't make sense to me. Saving Private Ryan and some of this. If this is the way it was, as much as it hurts me, I don't mind seeing it because it deepens my love and respect for people that will do what their country ordered them to do, you know.
Vietnam ripped our country to shreds more than any other war since the Civil War. And I think it took us all a long time to realize we were not as concerned about the political questions of the pros and cons of Vietnam. We were just trying to protect each other and to stay alive. And it was only after getting back from the war that I myself personally started to get some real misgivings about why we had tactically done what we had done with Vietnam. But it's very easy to see young people who enjoy all of the amenities of freedom and realize that this was paid for by a very severe price by a lot of people who shed their blood, you know. And my wife and I went to the movie one of the times, and we were sitting with a delightful young lady who's a Christian lady, and she had been a sergeant in the Army, and she was all ready to say, if some of the kids started to turn around and say, "Shh, you're talking," you know. I was trying to be real quiet, but she was going to say, "I want you to shut up, because he was there, you weren't." Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I just got to go here. I joined the Air Force. My draft number was such that I really was too big a trouble. But I just want to go in the service, and I thought the Air Force would be a good way to go. It was winding down. It was in the early 70s. And they call us a Vietnam-era veteran. If I got a benefit from that, it bothered me. I didn't go over there. I have friends that died over there. And to this day, I wonder about that. I think I didn't go over there, and then I went to the wall. I thought I'd be fine. I about died. Some of the kids I knew, and then I'm in the reserves. I stayed in the reserves, and I worked civil service, and they activated our whole unit. We went to Desert Storm, and I'm telling you, when we came back, I stayed in England and worked on the planes, and it didn't turn out to be what we thought maybe. But when we came back, and they're waving flags. And thousands on the runway at Maine, and there was Vietnam vets waved the flags. They were the ones probably in the front. I was sick, and I was happy that the public did this, on the other hand, I was sick, because doggone it, I don't care that it was a political thing. These guys did what their country said. I hope that more of us are realizing that, you know, because it's not about what if the war was a good one or not. It's about they went out and did. And it was very difficult for me. I kind of come up through that era, and it still is. And I didn't mean to go there, but I'd like you folks to think about this. Go right back to as far back as you can go. What the people have died in our country, right back to the Revolutionary War. Maybe we ought to think about that a little bit and thank God that people would do this, and it's because of God that we are free in here. So I just went off on a tangent there, but I feel very strongly about that. Well, you know, I want to run. This seems kind of out of context, but I was interested in that sergeant major guy in the. He seems so, he was funny, and he's like, "Don't you call me Grandpa? I'll kill you." And was this a kind of the way this guy was, or Plumley, right?
Sam Elliott ought to get an Academy Award nomination for that. I knew a different Sergeant Major of Baseball Plumley. He would gather us aside and he'd say, "Gee, you guys are young." I was 24 years old. And he said, "Let your sergeants run your platoons. Don't give out an order that you wouldn't give out yourself. Make sure you give your men the ammunition, the supplies, the food first. You go without it for yourself." But he was like a mentor to a lot of us because he had really been through the ringer. I think he's the only person I know of who made all 4 combat jumps with the 82nd Airborne Division in World War II. But Sam Elliott showed the rough side of Sergeant Major Plumley. But Sergeant Major Plumley is retired. He lives down in Columbus, Georgia. He almost became the Sergeant Major for the entire United States Army. Great guy.
Yeah, it was interesting contrast. One of my favorite lines was, he said, they talk about this Custer, and it was interesting how Colonel Moore would look at the history book from the French Army and look at Custer and the 7th, you know, Cavalry, and it looked like he almost had a little bit of Patton in there. He's going back and looking for similarities.
You know, one thing people don't realize who haven't been in the Army is that there is a great history to the United States Army called lineage. And the 7th Cav, of which Colonel Moore commanded, had been wiped out 2 times. Once was at Custer's last stand at the Little Bighorn in Wyoming in June 23rd of 1876. It had been wiped out again in Korea. Colonel Moore knew that a lot of the people going into this combat action were really unseasoned troops. They were very outnumbered, and I think it really played a mind. I didn't see any of the Patton in him at all. But what I did see him was a voice of real inner concern. Am I going to be commanding for history the same battalion that gets wiped out a 3rd time? And we darn near did get wiped out. When you think of the odds that we went up against, the movie mentioned 60 to 80 men. I think we probably had closer, well, it was between them of that number, but we were outnumbered by, gosh, 20 or 30 people per American soldier.
You know, I'm skipping over some of this. I think we're going to do another show, I think we're going to do. But there's one question that I wanted you to hit on, is for sure, before we take a break, is to tell us about the forgiveness and how that shaped your life thereafter, and some of the horrible things. And I think in the movie, Hal Moore made a statement that he'll never forgive himself, and the journalist, who you told me was pretty much accurate. There's a journalist there going through this. And the journalist said, "For what?" He said, "For me living and my man dying." Does this tie together? I don't quite get that.
I thought that was probably one of the most accurate segments of the movie. Mrs. Moore has told me in her subsequent letters that has been, without a doubt, probably the largest impediment that has been on his shoulders since coming back. He's a very sensitive man. I think he deeply regretted giving out the commands that resulted in the death of so many of his men, but I guess in a way I'm saying I'm glad that maybe he does retain that because he's a very sensitive man. And it was good that he was sensitive. I think for those of us who really saw The Ringer, if I could depart for a second, Randy, 7,744,000 men and women served in Vietnam. Only 153,303 of them were wounded. And that gives you an odds of less than 2 people per 100 who served in Vietnam were wounded in combat action. And I don't know of any statistics available from the Pentagon or anyplace else of how many people are still living in the United States who were wounded multiple times. And I think that if we can take a look at these statistics, I think those have a profound effect on us. We lost 58,128 people in Vietnam. That figure keeps being revised upward as more missing people are found. I think at last count, the North Vietnamese people had well over 1/3 soldiers who were missing in action. At the height of us, we had probably maybe 2,500 soldiers.
So our technology and everything, we definitely were doing damage, but it seemed like we were going in circles or something, not able to win it because of the structure of the war or something.
We got caught up into being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were round eyes, we'll be round eyes till the day we die. We would call them slope eyes. We got caught in the middle of a revolutionary war where they were trying to just get rid of foreigners, whether they be French or British or Japanese or Americans. They wanted you out of there, like a baseball player, umpire wants to say, "You're out of here," for his boys. But we didn't realize that for us it was a fight against communism. For them, it was a fight just to be rid of foreigners. And our country, unfortunately, did a real snow job with the news media on stating to people who got back that if you were against the war, you were not patriotic. I started to realize that I was very much against the war, tactically, the way we were fighting there, but yet I'm a very patriotic person.
Yeah.
And I got arrested for it. I had an MP arrest me when I got back to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I just kept looking at this whole thing and thinking, nuts, I'm going to just stand my ground. I've got 4 Purple Hearts from this darn thing, and I have shed my blood for my country, but we are not putting our best foot forward. And finally he relaxed and asked me if I could orient and teach the military police officers at Fort Benning, and we wound up having a wonderful session. But I was probably one of the first returning combat veterans who spoke out against the war back at that time.
And that's interesting. And we're going to come back and close this off. I think we're going to have to do another program. There's so much here. But you bring up a good point. I imagine the psychological problems of a war, World War II and other wars, yes, it had a big purpose. Even though it was terrible, it was clear what was what. Then they have to come back and plus fight with this, well, I'm a patriot, but I don't think they did it right. And then some, there's a lot of issues here that were different. Yeah. So we'll come back and we'll finish this off in just a minute. We'll be right back.
It is more than a trial by fire. It is a rite of passage. And if you can master your fear, outsmart your enemy, and never yield even to yourself, you will be changed forever. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Welcome back. Talking to Bill Schiebler. We were talking about something just before we went to break. Maybe you can expound upon it.
Well, we talked about forgiveness and about, I just told you a story about what my grandfather has said to me. My grandfather was from Appleton, Wisconsin, and when I got ready to go into the service, he was the only grandparent who I had ever known. And I remember going over to Appleton to see him, and he was sitting in a rocking chair. And at the end of our conversation, I think we both realized that we might never see each other alive again. And I remember he had worked in the paper mills, and with a very grizzled hand, he grabbed my forearm, and he said, just remember to be kind to your enemies, because God loves them just as much as he loves you. And especially be kind to your prisoners. Oh my gosh, I couldn't figure it out at the time, but we got into a problem one night where I had to go out to rescue one of our officers who was stranded alone with a couple of prisoners. One of the prisoners, his feet were masses of bloody pulp. I didn't know what to do with this prisoner. I was so tempted to just let one bullet take care of it all. And I thought about what my grandfather had said to me. And I caught myself, and I thought, oh, okay. I picked this prisoner up and started to carry him on my back. I carried him for over 3 miles all the way back. And on the way back, I was a lefty back then, but the prisoner started to cry. And unbeknownst, I just gave him a kind of a nudge, and he started to kiss me on the sides of my neck. And I was so embarrassed about that. I couldn't tell that for 30-some years, because I'm sure they would have said, "Wow, where were you two tonight?" I said, "Oh, he was out there kissing me."
I thought of the Sermon on the Mount when you said that about your grandpa.
Yeah.
He said, "Love your enemies." It's not that we agree with but if they knew the God of the Bible, there wouldn't be any wars or whatever, But it's interesting to me is they're trying to kill you and all this is going on, then all of a sudden they become a prisoner. Where does this line cross? Where they're disarmed and you catch them, or they raise their hands, or you know what I'm saying?
I think the line was crossed several times from anybody who really saw combat. We began to realize that this prisoner was a human being too, a child of God, a child of Christ's child, just like I was. Jesus didn't love me any more than he loved this North Vietnamese fellow. And the end of the story was that after I got him back, we turned him over to the division, and the division called back down and said, "You're going to have to come up to talk to this kid. He won't talk to anybody except the tall one." And when I came up there, I thought, oh, what am I going to do? Well, I finally took my bayonet out and drew a map in the sand showing the United States and Wisconsin, where I was from. And then, to everybody's horror, I handed my bayonet to this prisoner. And we must have had 10 or 15 people around who just trained their weapons right on this guy. The guy started to smile. And then I had drawn a map of Vietnam, and then he showed me, and through the interpreter, I found out that he had a wife and 2 daughters.
Oh, wow.
I was single. I had a brother and a sister. We're 2 infantry people. We found a commonality that we both had families who we could talk about. He turned out to be the highest ranking sergeant major who had been captured so far in Vietnam. I didn't even realize it at that time.
Where does God fit into this picture? People killing, and how does God fit into this picture for you, Bill?
This is probably the best question you've asked me all afternoon. I think at first we all want to force something or control something, have it not be. Combat is a total presence of confusion. I think that the longer I went through combat, the more my spirituality grew, where I began to start to think, here we are, here they are. We're all out here acting like a bunch of idiots. We're trying to kill each other. And I finally started to get more and more serene, because I thought, God, you are in control here. And Jesus, I ask you to protect me. And if this is the time that I'm supposed to go, well, then that's so be it. And it was only after coming to this that I started to feel more comfortable with more serenity, that amidst the whole confusion, there was a certain peace that settled about me.
The peace that passes all understanding.
Yep.
Think about, This is the second time I had a World War II veteran that was on the bombers that usually 50% of them wouldn't come back, and he got shot down and captured. And he kept talking like, well, we've got, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go, And I said, how could you be this way? That's how much faith can help you, isn't it, in a situation like this?
It really did help me to have that faith. I thought, God, I've got to stop trying to control this. I'm getting everything is shot here.
And
I'm just going to have to leave it up to you, Lord.
you just gave a perfect definition to me of sovereignty. I have trouble explaining that. You just did, because you just give it up to the faith.
Oh, I had
irregardless.
I had to just say, okay, Lord, it's all yours.
So with the Lord living in there, it definitely would help people. Well, now, you mentioned something about, you learned something about forgiveness through all this, Bill.
In one of our breaks, you and I had talked about when the most frightening moment was for me. We were taught to never walk on a trail, but to walk beside it. I routed a trail one day, and a North Vietnamese soldier had his weapon cocked right on my forehead, and he went, he was out of ammunition. And a lot of people say your life flashes before you, but what flashed in front of me was not so much what I had done up to that point, but what I would hope to have been able to accomplish out from there in my life, to be married, to have a family, to have a job. And at that split second, I used the selector switch that you saw in the movie that puts the M16 on full automatic. It fires 17 bullets a second. Well, I sprayed this fellow instinctively, and he was carrying on his hip what looked like a little jar of some sort that had webbing around it. Obviously, it was explosives. Well, the whole thing blew this fellow up. I'm sure there weren't pieces the size of your thumbnail. I was blown way back. I thought, my gosh, my guts have been shot out. And I looked down slowly and started to realize I was all right, but I had been thrown back probably 15 or 20 feet by the impact of the explosion. When I got back to the States and started to go through the adjustments that I went through, I was driving down in Minneapolis one night, and I looked very casually over to a pizza place, and to my horror, here was one of these candles that was in a bowl like this with the webbing around there. And Randy, I can't tell you what it took to work up the gumption to go into that pizza place. And I'm going,
It's okay.
excuse me.
It's all right.
It's going to be difficult to talk about this, but I just sat there for the longest time just with my head in my arms, just crying at this table. Didn't order a pizza, didn't do anything, and finally a waitress came over, and she apparently had lost a brother in Vietnam, and she said, "Welcome back." And it took me that amount of time to realize that I was going to have to do something to speak about forgiveness. And I went down to a floral shop in Minneapolis, and I bought a couple of roses, and I was going to take it out to Fort Snelling, which is one of the big military cemeteries in the Twin Cities. And I realized that I couldn't just lay the two roses upon a gravesite, that I had to forgive my enemies as well as, asking for anything else. And I remembered some freshly cut grass in the ditch. I took the two roses and laid them down carefully and covered them over with grass because I needed to forgive my enemies. I think that one act did more to help me recover from the trauma of Vietnam. To forgive my enemies had to be done right.
Well, Bill, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to my producer here. We're going to get you on some more, I think.
Yeah.
I just want to say God bless you, and I hope people will feel like I do, that we owe so much to our veterans. And this Vietnam one gets me the worst because of the way it was viewed, and the kids still did what their country asked and things. And you definitely have that right there, and I appreciate personally that you've been able to share with us today.
Well, I'd like to thank you too, Randy, and may God bless and watch over your family too.
Thank you. And folks, I want to end this with one word: sovereignty. You know, if there's a God above, and there certainly is, the God of the Bible is the God. Jesus Christ is His Son. We share the gospel in every program. We're going to run those verses. I ask you, just read them. Just read them and ask God, and tell God you love Him and that you believe He sent His Son to die for you. And ask Him in your heart. That's what it is. And what we're talking about here, an enemy, North Vietnamese, maybe didn't have the opportunity to hear this. And like Bill shared, if we're not fighting anymore, how should we view this? Well, his grandpa was right. You know, we have the opportunity to share the truth, and then we have to choose. Everybody has to choose. It's a very mixed up deal. But this program today, I hope it touched you a little bit. You can see that our veterans, especially Vietnam veterans, we can still tell them we love them and show them today that it wasn't, that we appreciate what they did. And that's a big part of the program. So I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week.